The heavy gilded frame of my national accounting certification didn't stand a chance against my mother's grip, and as the glass shattered against the marble floor of the foyer, I realized she wasn't just destroying a piece of paper, she was performing a public execution of my dignity in front of 136 of the most powerful people in the state. I stood there, frozen in my best silk suit, while the sound of the frame hitting the floor echoed through the ballroom, silencing the quartet and the polite clinking of champagne flutes. My mother, Cynthia, didn't even blink. She just leaned in, her breath smelling of expensive gin and cold malice, and screamed that I was nothing more than a glorified, overglorified bookkeeper who had forgotten her place in this family. She told me to stop acting like I was special, her voice cutting through the humid air of the Hamptons like a serrated blade. Have you ever stood in a room full of people you've spent your entire life protecting, only to realize you are the only one in the room who is actually disposable? I looked toward the bar, hoping to see a flicker of defense in my father's eyes, but Jeffrey Vance didn't even look up from his 18-year-old scotch. Instead, he reached into the breast pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sliding it across the bar toward me with the clinical detachment of a man ordering a steak. It was an invoice printed on the company letterhead I had designed for exactly $1,100,000. He told me, without a hint of irony, that this represented every single cent he claimed they had wasted raising me. From my private kindergarten tuition to the gas he used to drive me to the graduation ceremony he hadn't even stayed to finish. He told me to pay it by Monday or to never use the Vance name again. My sister, Brianna, didn't even wait for me to process the debt. She reached out and snatched my car keys right off the marble cocktail table, laughing as she told the crowd that our father had secretly transferred the title to her name that very morning. They even brought my boss Arthur to the party, the man whose firm I'd saved from 3 separate SEC audits just so he could fire me in front of the board of directors while I stood there in a silence so thick I could taste the copper in my mouth. They thought they were cutting off a dead limb, but they didn't realize they were actually signing their own eviction notice. My name is Maya, and for the last 10 years, I haven't just been an accountant, I've been a forensic surgeon, operating in the shadow to clean up the financial filth my family left behind. If you have ever been the invisible pillar who kept your entire world afloat while being treated like an annoying burden, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I want to know who else in this community understands what it feels like to be the secret engine of a machine that's trying to crush you. I'm about to tell you exactly how I turned the most humiliating night of my life into the most profitable transaction I ever made. The silence in that ballroom lasted for what felt like an eternity, a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed against my lungs. I didn't cry, though my eyes burned with the sudden, sharp realization of my own naivety. I didn't ask why, because the answer was written in the arrogant, hollow smirk on Jeffrey's face. Behind him, the guests. People whose tax returns I had scrubbed and whose dirty secrets I had buried in the offshore accounts were already beginning to whisper and snicker, the sound like dry leaves skittering across a grave. Cynthia was smoothing out the skirt of her designer dress, looking satisfied, as if she had just performed a heroic act of domestic discipline. For 34 years, I had been the fix-it girl working 90-hour weeks so Jeffrey could play the part of a real estate tycoon while I drafted the compliance reports that kept Arthur out of a federal jumpsuit. I looked at my boss and saw him avoiding my gaze, clinking his glass against my father's, celebrating the fact that he wouldn't have to pay my 6-figure salary anymore. It's a strange, haunting thing to realize you are the only adult in a room full of spoiled children wearing 3-piece suits. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, the anger wasn't hot or loud. It was cold. It was clinical. It was a balance sheet that finally needed to be closed. I looked down at the invoice in my hand. $100,000. He had even charged me for the interest on the money he spent on my braces in the 90s. It was a joke, a desperate power play, but he wasn't laughing. He actually believed he had leverage because he thought that because he had given me life, he owned my future. I looked at Brianna, who was twirling my Audi keys around her finger like a trophy she hadn't earned. She had spent the last 3 years living off the dividends I had personally secured for her by restructuring her trust, yet she looked at me like I was a stain on the ballroom carpet. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my honor or remind them of the nights I'd spent sleeping on the office floor to save their reputation. I simply nodded politely. I told them I understood the terms perfectly. I said that if they wanted a clean break, they would get exactly what they asked for. I turned and walked toward the massive oak doors of the Hamptons estate, the heels of my shoes clicking against the floor like a countdown. I didn't look back. As I stepped onto the porch, the heavy thud of the door closing behind me felt like a gavel coming down on a final verdict. The rain began to fall almost instantly, cold, relentless, and soaking through my professional suit within seconds. I didn't have a car, I didn't have a job, and according to the paper in my pocket, I didn't have a family. But as I walked down that long, winding driveway toward the main road to wait for a bus, I felt a lightness in my chest that I hadn't known in a decade. Loneliness makes dangerous choices feel reasonable, but for the first time, I wasn't choosing them. I was choosing me. They thought they were throwing me to the wolves, but they didn't realize that I was the one who had been feeding the pack. I sat on that bus for 45 minutes, the hum of the engine vibrating through my bones as the rain drummed a steady, rhythmic beat against the glass. For 10 years, I had been the invisible engine of the Vance family. I was the one who woke up at 4 in the morning to balance the books while my mother was still sleeping off her third martini. I was the one who personally audited every single real estate deal Jeffrey closed, fixing the catastrophic errors that would have landed him in front of a grand jury years ago. I had been the silent investor in their version of a perfect life, footing the bill for a lifestyle they hadn't actually earned. When I finally reached my apartment in the city, a place they didn't even know existed because they never bothered to ask where I lived, I didn't even turn on the lights. I walked straight to my home office and sat in the dark for a moment, the blue light of my monitors finally illuminating my face. I opened the file titled Family Support. It wasn't just a spreadsheet, it was a record of my own servitude, a detailed map of every time I had allowed my compassion to be used as a high-limit credit card. I looked at the numbers and felt a sharp, analytical clarity take hold. My compassion had been a luxury they'd been overdrafting for years, and tonight, the account was officially closed. Desire whispers louder than guilt, and their desire for status had finally drowned out any sense of loyalty they had left. Why do we stay in rooms where we aren't valued? I scrolled through the automated payments I had set up from my private accounts. $6,000 a month for the landscaping of the estate. $12,000 for the premium health insurance policies that covered my parents' and Brianna's wellness retreats. The property taxes, the country club dues, the secondary mortgage, all of it was linked to my credit and my personal guarantee. Jeffrey thought his real estate ventures were profitable, but the truth was his properties hadn't cleared a profit since 2018. He was playing a game of musical chairs with other people's money, and I was the one providing the music. I remembered a night 3 years ago when Jeffrey was about to lose his primary operating license due to a massive debt-to-income ratio. I stayed up for 72 hours straight, restructuring his entire portfolio and using my own personal savings as a secret guarantee to satisfy the bank's requirements. When I told him the license was safe, he didn't even look up from his golf magazine. He just said, "That's what we pay you for, Maya." But he wasn't paying me. I was paying him for the privilege of being his daughter. I reached for my mouse, the cursor hovering over the master deactivate button on the family office server. I clicked it. One by one, the status lights on my screen turned from a healthy green to a terminal, flickering red. Landscaping, gone. Insurance, cancelled. Club memberships, revoked. I accessed the mortgage portal for the Hamptons estate and submitted a formal request for the immediate removal of my name as a guarantor, citing my termination of employment. I leaned back in my chair, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in my eyes like cold fire. Jeffrey wanted me out of the family. He got his wish, but he forgot the most basic rule of any business. You cannot fire the bank and still expect the ATM to keep giving you cash. My phone started to vibrate on the desk. Dad. I didn't answer. I just watched it dance across the wood until the screen went dark. The arrogance of a bully is a fragile thing, held together by the silence of the people they hurt. By the next morning, my family and Arthur were still draped in the delusion of their own power, unaware that the floorboards had already been removed from beneath them. Brianna was the first to broadcast her own downfall. At 10 o'clock sharp, she posted a reel titled, "Unboxing My New Birthday Gift." In the video, she was twirling around my Audi A8, tagging me in a final digital twist of the knife to show the world she had won. I didn't report the post. I didn't leave an angry comment. I simply sent a single, encrypted text to the leasing company's recovery department. Asset misappropriation confirmed. Vehicle is at the following coordinates. Immobilized via GPS now. By 11, my mother sent a voice note that sounded like it had been recorded through a heavy veil of gin and panic. "Maya, you've created a real mess. The country club just called saying our membership is under review for non-payment. Fix it immediately. Don't be a child. She still thought she was in charge. She still thought my labor was a natural resource she could mine for free. Then came Brandon, the lawyer of the family, the one who got his degree from a school Jeffrey had to donate a library to. He sent an email claiming they were initiating a forensic audit of the family trust to see if I had stolen anything. I actually laughed out loud, a dry, hacking sound in the quiet of my office. They still didn't understand that there was no their money. There was only my credit and my willingness to look the other way. I opened my contact list and dialed a specialist I had kept on retainer for a moment, just like this. "It's Maya," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "I'm invoking the Scorched Earth Protocol, pull every guarantee, revoke every software license I own, and accelerate every debt on the ledger. No grace periods, no exceptions." It was 11:51 in the morning, exactly 36 hours since they had handed me that invoice. The Vance legacy was officially on life support, and I had just pulled the plug. "I need to know, if you were standing in my shoes, would you have waited this long to walk away? Drop a comment with your enough is enough moment. I'm reading every single one." By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Arthur had finally tried to log into the firm's main server. I could almost see the look on his face when he found his entire screen was a sea of red text. "Critical error, system license expired." Arthur thought he was firing a moral liability, but he was actually firing the only person who held the encryption keys to his firm's survival. The software he used to track client assets was registered in my name, paid for by my private corporation. 10 minutes later, Brandon called me, sounding like he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Maya, Arthur's system is down. He's losing millions in trade timing. This is sabotage." "I'm an accountant, Brandon," I said, my voice as cold as the rain from the night before. "The software license is revocable at will upon my termination. This isn't sabotage, it's an expiration of services. You wanted a clean break, remember?" I hung up before he could respond and told my attorney, David, that it was time to drop the legal trap I had been setting for years. Jeffrey and Brandon didn't realize they had just triggered the reversion clause in Eleanor's will. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the only one in this family with a soul, and she had written a very specific moral clause into the deed of the Hamptons' property. It stated that if any direct descendant was unjustly exiled or financially exploited by the head of the family unit, the ownership of the property would immediately revert to that descendant to ensure they weren't left destitute. By forcing me to sign that public disownment paper in front of 136 witnesses, they had legally handed me the deed to the house. I officially withdrew my status as a guarantor for Jeffrey's $10 million mortgage. Without my collateral and my spotless credit score holding up the bridge, the bank sent a formal notice of acceleration. They had 24 hours to produce $10 million in cash or face immediate, non-negotiable foreclosure. My phone buzzed again, a text from Brianna. It was a photo of a tow truck hooking up the Audi A8 in the middle of a busy street in Manhattan, her friends watching in the background as her gift was hauled away. "Maya, you psycho, tell them to stop." I didn't reply. One by one, the Vance family's pillars were crumbling into dust, but the real blow was yet to come. I had discovered that Jeffrey and Arthur had been running a secondary, off-books operation for years, using my forged digital signature to fund foundations that didn't actually exist. They thought they were being clever, but they were just being criminals. The power flip began at 9 o'clock the following morning. I didn't go to them. I sent a shadow creditor dossier to the estate. I had spent the last 2 years quietly buying up Jeffrey's private debt from secondary lenders at a discount. I didn't just want the house anymore. I wanted his entire soul on my ledger. Jeffrey called me, wheezing into the phone, claiming he was having a heart attack. "I'm an accountant, Jeffrey, not a cardiologist," I replied, staring out the window at the city skyline. "Every second you spend acting is costing you $5,000 in late fees. The clock is ticking." I could hear Cynthia shrieking in the background as the repo men arrived to begin inventorying the art collection, paintings I had paid the insurance on for years. Brandon called to say he had been fired by Arthur and was ruined because he couldn't even read a simple reversion clause in a will. I called Jeffrey one last time, my voice low and final. "I'm sending over a document. You will sign over the remaining equity in Vance Development and the deed to the Hamptons property. In exchange, I won't hand the file about the forged signatures to the FBI. You'll be broke, Jeffrey, but you won't be in a jumpsuit. Choose now." He signed. The account was finally balanced. At exactly 12 noon, the heavy oak doors of the estate were sealed by the law. Jeffrey tried to steal the silver candelabras on his way out, but the sheriff stopped him at the door. Cynthia tried to smuggle out Fabergé eggs in the lining of her fur coats, but a deputy confiscated them before she could reach the driveway. The most satisfying moment wasn't the money or the house, it was the silence. My family was finally alone in a house that had become a cage of their own making. They gathered on the porch with nothing but plastic trash bags filled with clothes as the sheriff pulled the double doors shut and handed me the keys. 6 months later, my life is quiet and the air feels cleaner. I moved into a new office in Manhattan, one where my name is the only one on the door. The Hamptons estate is no longer a monument to ego. It is now the Eleanor Vance Center, a nonprofit that provides financial literacy and legal aid to women who have been financially abused by their families. I recently drove past a greasy diner in Queens and saw a woman scrubbing a table near the window. It was Brianna. She saw my car, a new one, bought with my own clean money, and she looked at me for a split second before looking back down at her dirty rag. Family isn't about the blood in your veins, it's about the respect in your actions. I've deleted the spreadsheets. I've closed the accounts. The debt is paid in full, and for the first time in 34 years, I don't owe anyone a single second of my life. If this story reminded you to never let anyone define your worth based on your utility, hit like and subscribe right now. Don't ever let your compassion become a luxury for someone else to overdraft. Your value is not a line item on someone else's balance sheet, it's the whole damn bank. Would you like me to analyze the specific legal clauses Maya used to reclaim her power, or should we look at another story of a hidden genius finally taking what's theirs?